All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're heading up into the high Himalayas to tackle one of the world's greatest legends, the Yeti. You know, the abominable snowman. But trust me, this is not going to be your typical monster hunt.
We're going to ask a different kind of question. What if the real story here isn't about some undiscovered ape at all? What if it's actually a fascinating tale about very real animals, about cultural survival, and honestly about our own connection to the wild?
You can picture it, right? The huge white-furred beast stomping around on a frozen glacier, kind of like something out of a movie. It's an image we all know. But that image? It's the first and maybe the biggest misunderstanding of this entire legend.
Okay, so let's start by totally breaking down that one single image. Because the first thing you have to understand is that in the Himalayas, there isn't just one Yeti. Local folklore actually talks about at least 3 different creatures. First up, you've got the Zute. This one is huge, it's aggressive, and it lines up almost perfectly with the Himalayan brown bear. Then there's the Mefte. This is your classic shy man-bear type, which sounds a lot like the very rare Tibetan blue bear or an Asian black bear. And finally, you have the Teluma, a much smaller, timid, ape-like thing, which could easily be a monkey or maybe even a red panda.
And this is so important. As the anthropologist Dr. Myra Shackley points out, our whole Western idea of a single Yeti is just a massive oversimplification. We've basically taken a whole zoo of local legends and real animals and crammed them all into one convenient, monster-shaped box.
And that brings us to the second huge myth we have to bust, the whole snowman thing. We call it the abominable snowman, but the actual animals behind these legends, they don't live up on the barren, snowy peaks. No way. They live down in the forested valleys, where the food is.
And look, you don't have to take my word for it. The famous biologist George Schaller called the idea of a big mammal living on a glacier year-round biologically absurd. I mean, it makes sense, right? There's just nothing for it to eat up there. The so-called snowman is actually a forest animal.
Okay, so if the stories are based on real animals, that's one thing. But what about all the physical proof? The footprints, the scalps. Let's put that so-called evidence under the microscope.
Ah, yes, this photo. This is the one that kicked off the whole global Yeti craze. It was taken back in 1951 by a super respected mountaineer, Eric Shipton. And that footprint looks so weird, so humanoid, that for decades, this was the definitive proof for believers everywhere.
But science has a really simple and honestly kind of elegant explanation. It goes like this. A bear makes a totally normal print in the snow, then the sun comes out, and its heat starts to melt the edges. The whole print gets bigger, it distorts, and the individual claw and pad marks blur together. And suddenly, you've got what looks like a set of human-like toes. It's amazing how a simple bear track can turn into a mystery.
And what about all those other famous relics from the monasteries in the Himalayas? The legendary Yeti scalp from Kumjung? Well, scientific analysis proved it was just made from the skin of a serow, which is basically a type of goat antelope. And that mummified Yeti hand from Pongbochi? DNA tests came back and the bones were human. Every single time, science found a clear, down-to-earth explanation. Which brings us right into the modern era of this investigation. This is where the ultimate mystery-solving tool, DNA analysis, finally steps onto the scene and changes everything. So the whole genetic investigation really started to get serious back in 2013. An early study suggested this really wild link to an ancient polar bear. It was intriguing, but it was a much more thorough study in 2017 using all the latest and greatest techniques that really gave us the final conclusive answer. Now, what's so cool about this is just how clear the results are. Dr. Charlotte Lindquist and her team took 9 of the best Yeti samples they could find. We're talking hair, skin, bone, the whole deal. So what did they find? 5 were from Himalayan brown bears, 2 were from Tibetan brown bears, 1 was an Asian black bear, and 1 was, well, it was a dog. And the number of unknown primates? A big fat 0. So at this point, the scientific consensus is crystal clear. After all the searching, all the speculation, the biological part of this mystery is solved. The animal, behind the stories, behind the tracks, behind all of it, is the bear. But wait a minute. Case closed, right? Mystery solved? Well, not so fast. Because if it's all just bears, why is this myth so incredibly powerful? Why does it stick around? This, right here, is where the story gets really interesting. Check this out. A survey of Sherpa guides from 2018 is just so revealing.
only about a third of them said they believe in a physical, undiscovered animal. But a whopping 87% said they believe the Yeti is real as a cultural or spiritual thing. So for the people who actually live there, whether it's a real animal or not isn't even the most important part of the story.
See, the Yeti myth isn't just some spooky campfire story. It's actually a sophisticated cultural tool. It helps protect the environment by marking certain places as sacred and off-limits. It builds social cohesion. It gives a face to the dangers of the wilderness, and it teaches really important safety lessons about having respect for the mountains. This story has a job to do.
And this quote from Dr. David Livingston Smith just nails it. He says, "Myths aren't mistakes or primitive errors. They're sophisticated cultural technologies that do things for a society that simple, literal facts just can't."
So let's go back to our original question. Is the Yeti real? And the answer is absolutely yes. Just not as some mystery monster. It's real as a powerful cultural icon, as a local name for the region's incredible and rare bears, and maybe most importantly, as a story that helps people live in balance with the wild. And you know what? That might be the most real and the most important truth of all.